So, Skinwalker Ranch is a 480-acre plot of land that is located in the Utah Basin near Fort Duchesne in Utah. 480 acres is a lot of land, but that doesn't mean that the Shermans didn't have neighbors. How could it be possible that the Shermans endured so much craziness and yet their immediate neighbors saw nothing? And what of the previous owners? Did they see anything? Also, the property backs up to the Ute tribe's protected lands. What do they think about what's going on there? The city of Fort Duchesne has a population of 620 as of the year 2000. So that's a very small town. But even still, if the Shermans' claims were legitimate, surely there would be at least one other local to corroborate their story or perhaps even have their own personal experiences to share. The truth is that most everyone in this area has not one, but many stories to tell regarding everything from strange lights in the sky to terrifying abduction stories. But the Shermans had kept their struggle so close to their chest that they had no idea that they weren't alone. Law enforcement officials admit the UFO reports picked up a lot during the 1950s. The experiences are way too varied to list, but one thing is absolutely for sure. The Utah Basin is a magnet for the unknown. Jeremy Corbell refers to the locals' opinion of the strange phenomena of Utah Basin as leery. He uses the word corrosive. They don't look at the lights in the sky with wonder, as some of us might. Whatever is out there, it's been there for a long time. Now, members of the Ute tribe consider the area where Skinwalker Ranch is located as forbidden and discourages all their members from venturing onto the property. It is said that the ridge along the northern border of the property is the path of the Skinwalker. According to the legend, the Skinwalkers reside in a wooded area to the north called Dark Canyon and make their way down the ridge nightly. The Skinwalker can be seen as a man, but most likely as an animal, as they develop the ability to shapeshift as they transform from shaman into a malevolent skinwalker. Even if you are approached by a skinwalker in human form, you will usually find that they seem awkward, as if the flesh on their body doesn't quite fit. You do not want to meet a skinwalker. It's said that if you even make eye contact with one of these beings, it gives them access into your mind. And even thinking or talking about skinwalkers can open you up to their attentions. And their attentions is the last thing you would ever want. Some say that a skinwalker can poison you, causing terrible burns to appear on your skin, and even go as far as to kill you and take your skin. So, what did Bigelow do with the ranch? Robert Bigelow fashioned and funded an elite team of interdisciplinary scientists and researchers called the National Institute for Discovery Science. NIDS was specifically founded as a UFO and extraterrestrial investigation team. He started by moving a double-wide trailer onto the field of the first homestead for the researchers to live and work in. He allowed Terry Sherman to stay on as caretaker, allowing some of the Sherman cattle to remain on property. 3 observation towers were constructed in each of the homesteads. The structures were surrounded by long fenced dog runs. Guard dogs were planted at each observation tower to act as surveillance, as well as what Knapp refers to as biosensors. Bigelow believed that the animals could easily sense things that humans couldn't see with the naked eye. Bigelow then purchased his own cattle for the property to be used as skinwalker bait. Installed throughout the property was a meticulous surveillance system with cameras placed high up where no intruder or animal could feasibly tamper with them. The NIDS team began cataloging each of the Sherman family members' experiences. and followed up with an extensive background check on Terry and Gwen. And they checked out. They were a normal couple with college degrees and good jobs and 2 children who were both honor students. Plant and soil samples were then taken and tested for any distinctive properties, ruling out the possibility of airborne hallucinogens. And then they waited, and soon enough, the activity showed itself. According to journalist George Knapp, the team witnessed and cataloged over 78 anomalies on the ranch within the first year of the investigation. And not one instance occurred the same way twice. The activity was entirely unpredictable, which frustrated and fascinated the NIDS team. The NIDS team witnessed a wide variety of aerial phenomena, including those blue orbs that murdered the Shermans' dogs. These strange flying spheres were nicknamed the Blue Meanies because they appeared to be able to not only physically hurt others around them, but they seemed to be able to do psychological harm as well. Other aerial anomalies included the ominous black triangles, a refrigerator-shaped craft which flew so low that it snapped off the tops of the trees, flashing orbs, and flying disc-shaped craft, none of which the NIDS team was able to explain. Whatever exists at that ranch did not like the dog runs either. They would find the gates would open themselves and the dogs would be released out into the fields. They would try padlocking them and the padlocks would either be destroyed or missing. And then finally, holes would appear in the chain link fences with no explanation as to how they got there. Unfortunately, most of the evidence captured by the security cameras has been kept under wraps. But there was one highly strange occurrence caught on camera where it appears that 2 skyscrapers simply appear and then disappear in the middle of the homestead. This could be disputed as a mirage or a reflection of some sort from a nearby city, but the ranch is located nowhere near a city with towers like that. Now, the NIDS team was able to analyze several different cattle mutilations, but there's one story that stands out among the rest. One day, Terry and Gwen were out tagging new calves. They tagged a calf in the first homestead who was with its mother, and then moved on further into the middle homestead to check on the other cattle. About half an hour later, their dog alerted them back in the direction of the first calf and its mother. The dog then whimpered and then darted off in the opposite direction, disappearing deep into the bush. Realizing, of course, that the dog must have sensed something that they could not, Terry and his wife rushed back to the cow and her calf. They found the mother standing close to where they had last seen her, but she seemed extremely agitated. And then they found the calf. The calf had been laying on the ground spread eagle. It was missing its entire body cavity. Its eye had been removed and was lying next to it on the ground. The femur bone had been ripped from its socket, and finally, the ear that the rancher had tagged only moments before looked as though it had been removed by a laser and was nowhere to be found. Again, there was no blood present at the scene. The innards were completely missing, and the femur bone being ripped out of the socket was a huge puzzle because there was no way that you could do that without damaging the socket. And the NIDS team did run a pathology report, and it came back with the finding that the calf had indeed been killed elsewhere. It was not killed in the field. And that the eye and the ear and the body cavity had been removed with surgical instrumentation. There is no way that this calf had been killed by a predator. And even if this had been done by a human, there was absolutely no way they could have captured the calf, transported it to another location, removed up to 40 pounds of meat perfectly without covering the fur in blood, and perfectly dislocating a femur, driving back to the site and placing the calf as it was seen, and then driving off in less than 45 minutes. This incident was one that really thwarted the NIDS team. It was one circumstance where they had all of the physical evidence but could still draw no logical conclusion as to what had taken place. Oh, side note, and it's probably worth mentioning that the dog that alerted the Shermans to the calf in the first place was never seen again. NIDS began investigating cattle mutilations in the Utah Basin area and found that the Shermans were not the only family to experience these horrors. The Garcias, who were the Shermans' neighbors, had cattle who looked as though they had been lifted up into the air and dropped from 100 feet up. In my opinion, the most interesting story from the NIDS investigation has nothing to do with the cattle mutilations, though. Many of the NIDS investigations took place at night because that's when the activity mostly occurred. One such night, some investigators were posted up on top of the ridge. They saw a strange orb appear in the middle of the homestead, and it began growing in size, so much so that it almost transformed into a sort of window. Through this circle of light, they saw what appeared to be a tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel was a daylight sky. Remember, this was the middle of the night. It was almost as if this was a tear into another dimension. What's more terrifying is that they saw something crawling through the tunnel, sort of elbowing its way through and onto the middle homestead. It succeeded in crawling through the portal, and when it stood up, the investigators recounted seeing a very tall, humanoid figure with no neck and no distinctive features. As the portal closed on itself and disappeared behind the creature, the man, or whatever it was, stood there only for a moment before breaking out into a run straight for the ridge where the investigators were watching it. Naturally, the investigators packed up their stuff immediately and ran back down towards the house. I understand why they did it, but I wish that they had hung on for maybe a couple more seconds just so they could have seen what that thing was. But again, I get it. I would have ran. The NIDS team was stationed at Skinwalker Ranch for several years, but as the activity began to dissipate and it became increasingly hard for the investigators to find any scientific conclusions as to why these things were happening on the ranch, the team was disbanded in 2004. However, this does not mean that the investigation was completely discontinued. Only NIDS was. In 2017, the New York Times posted an article confirming what many of us already believed to be true, that the United States government had funded a UFO investigative program with black budget money. This particular program referred to in the article is called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The frontman for this operation was the Defense Intelligence Agency's Luis Elizondo, who last year resigned in protest of the corruption surrounding alien intelligence in the United States military. Now, honestly, Elizondo is an extremely interesting character, and the whole ATIP thing is going to get its own series. But there's something that I'm going to need to make very, very clear before we move on with this topic. ATIP is a real thing. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a legend. It is a real thing that your tax dollars are paying for. And I use the present tense right now when I say are paying because there's a lot of misinformation that's been spread around about ATIP. Luis Elizondo himself, along with journalist George Knapp and others, have tried to set the record straight on this. According to the Wikipedia article on ATIP, 22 million tax dollars were allotted to the program and spent over the course of 5 years. This has been proven to be false. 22 million is only a fraction of what has been put into ATIP, which was never officially disbanded. According to Luis Elizondo, the program is still alive today. Stay with me because this gets really interesting. I promise it all ties in. Specifically, the 22 million was allotted to a private contractor, a company called BASS, which stands for Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. Bigelow, Robert Bigelow. Yes, the black budget sum of $22 million went to Robert Bigelow. His company was hired as a subcontractor to assist with analyzing and housing UFO specimens for ATIP. You have questions. I understand. I'm going to try to answer them all in the ATIP video, but I think the most important question right now is why would the US military hire a subcontractor, a private company, to handle a topic as sensitive as UFO investigation? Well, according to Luis Elizondo, when the government hires a private entity to participate in a project, it makes the findings of said project FOIA exempt. FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. So, because the Defense Intelligence Agency hired Robert Bigelow to house and analyze whatever it is they found regarding ATIP, we as citizens have no right to this information. So fine, obviously Bigelow's involved, but what does all of this have to do with Skinwalker Ranch? Well, many locals and investigators say that the energy shifted on the ranch between 2007 and 2016. Remember, the NIDS team was privately funded by Robert Bigelow and was disbanded and moved out of the property in 2014. But in 2007, ATIP was officially founded. Apparently, the presence coming in and out of the property, starting in 2007, shifted from scientific to military. Security was intensified, and the public road leading into the property was converted into private. The once simple ranch gate was swapped for a high-end automatic fence with a guard post. Now, it's important to understand that Robert Bigelow was the owner of that property at the time, but what was going on there, we don't exactly know. But there are theories. Oh, there are theories. Is it possible that part of the $22 million to investigate extraterrestrial activity was used in experimentation on Skinwalker Ranch? I think probably. Now, most of the evidence found by the NIDS team has been kept under wraps, but before the team was disbanded, journalist George Knapp, who you may know from the Bob Lazar interviews, was invited onto the ranch. George began the making of what he knew would be a groundbreaking documentary. However, after producing what can only be imagined as hundreds of hours of footage, the project received a cease and desist. George claims that this occurred because Bigelow was worried about word getting out about the ranch, and then he would have to deal with curious trespassers. Now, this seems logical, right? Don't want trespassers, so can't have a documentary. But to me, no, I completely disagree. Bigelow invited George onto the property himself. He knew that George was going to try to either write a book, which he did, or he was going to try to produce a documentary. At the very least, he was going to take pictures. You know what I mean? You don't invite a journalist onto the property without knowing full well in advance that obviously word might get out. So personally, I think that George Knapp's film was halted for another reason. I just can't figure out what it is yet. By 2012, as the story goes, the activity on the ranch had subsided, and that is when something strange happened. Filmmaker Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp were allowed access to the ranch by Bigelow himself to produce a documentary on the happenings at the ranch. For the first time in over 10 years, George was allowed to publicize his footage from the NIDS investigation in the 2-hour documentary based off George's book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. Now, I had been doing a very modest investigation on the ranch before the documentary came out in 2018, but I will say that it is very good. However, if you've done your own investigation on the topic, it will be a little bit frustrating because you can tell that George Knapp and Jeremy both know things that they can't say on camera. During the production of Jeremy's film, however, Bigelow actually sold the property to what is said to be a private business owner who demands that his identity remain a secret. In a rather chilling scene, Jeremy interviews who is said to be the new owner while hiding his face and distorting his voice. In the interview, the new owner boasts of the technological advances of his investigative tactics and shows several impressive images of UFO craft above the ranch. He also says that they have recorded seismic and infrasonic anomalies and has received highly abnormal signals whilst being on the ranch. The new owner is the most interesting and frustrating part of this entire topic. I have spent months at this point, you guys, trying to figure out who this person is, and I still don't know, but there are some things I do know. The site of Skinwalker Ranch is no longer a residential plot of land. It is now technically an archaeological museum, according to Google Maps. And apparently the 480-acre plot of land has been increased to over 500 acres. According to Utah State records, the owner of the plot of land is Adamantium Holdings or Adamantium Real Estate LLC, depending on what you're looking at. I have found Utah State documentation of the founding of Adamantium Holdings, but this guy's name is not on the documentation. It's actually a woman's name, who obviously I'm not going to disclose here because I think she's just like a regular person that works for them. Anyway, the whole thing makes me feel very frustrated because I just want to know who it is. I'm frustrated, but also really uneasy because the security force on the ranch has really upped the ante. It's very scary now. During Jeremy's interview with the owner, they take a walk onto the property surrounded by a security team wielding assault rifles. What on earth do you think is out on the ranch if you need to be surrounded by dudes with assault rifles? What is this? So anyway, who is the new owner? To be frank, I don't know, as I've said before. But let's get into the theories of who he might be. We do know that whoever he is a white, medium-built man. He looks as though he could be between 35 and 50, looking at his hands and neck. Obviously, this man has an interest in the extraterrestrial question and is willing to spend millions finding answers. The fact that he named his company Adamantium Holdings is like a little bit telling to me. Like, obviously you're an X-Men fan. He also states in Jeremy's documentary that he has several successful business ventures. So who is that? A lot of people are saying that it could be Elon Musk because of the build, the skin color, eccentricity, the alien interest, and the X-Men reference. Well, I think, of course, this could be a possibility. That's way too easy. Another possibility would be Brandon D. Fugal. I know, you're thinking, who? He is a billionaire in Salt Lake City. He is of the correct age. He is a chairman of Coldwell Banker Commercial, which is a real estate company, the co-founder of Accent Corp, which is a company that produces chromatography devices. He was the co-founder of the startup company Cipher Corp, which developed binaural noise suppressing algorithms for cellular devices. And finally, Fugal is the director of the Ancient Historical Research Foundation. To be honest with you guys, this is probably the guy in my opinion, but I can't officially say that. The dude has guys with assault rifles following him around his front yard. Like, I'm frightened, so he might be. He probably is. So we've come to my last question regarding Skinwalker Ranch, or Adamantium Ranch, I guess. Is the US government still channeling black budget money into the investigations in Skinwalker Ranch? Or is this just a really expensive hobby for whoever owns it now? Robert Bigelow has attempted to phase himself out of the spotlight, doing fewer and fewer interviews. And both Jeremy and Knapp and the film crew all signed NDAs stating that even if the identity of the new owner was revealed in the future, that they could not speak on the matter. Skinwalker Ranch is just a crazy maze of just baffling stuff. There's so much going on there. But what do you guys think is going on there? Do you think that this is the work of malevolent witches, skinwalkers? Do you think that this is another Area 51? Do you think that this is the government using US soil to reverse engineer alien technology? What do you guys think is going on? Let me know. And who do you guys think the new owner is? Let me know in the comments below if you have any sort of idea. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, it won't be a very long wait, I promise. Take care, guys. Bye.